Israel has reacted with disregard and disdain. Why are they getting away with murder at this unprecedented scale? Because they were never held accountable. That is why they confess to their crimes. That is why they steal our lives, our land, our resources, our money, our past, our present, and our future in broad daylight. Mr. President, one day the massacres will stop. But how will we get over it? How will we get over the mass graves, the inability to bury our loved ones, to offer them a dignified burial, seeing them in plastic bags? How will we get over 1,000 Palestinian children amputated without anesthesia? Can you hear their screams? Can you feel their pain? Can you imagine if they were your own children? How can we get over 8,000 Palestinians under the rubble? Those who were blessed to die quickly, and those who endured a terrible and terrifying death, a slow death under the rubble while we were unable to save them. How do you get over a genocide? We will be asked, nevertheless, despite all that we are enduring and all that we have endured for 75 years, to move on, to count our dead one more time, to count our wounded, our permanently disabled, the people scarred for life, the millions of victims, and move on. We will be asked to be peaceful. We will be asked to be grateful that this horrible chapter among so many other chapters, even though this one is the worst one we have gone through, is over until the next one begins. This is the ultimate expression of double standards. The other side is never asked to move on if Israelis are killed, never asked to be peaceful in such situations. This is the ultimate expression of racism, of dehumanization of our nation. We shall all be subject to the same rules, to the same expectations. We should all have our humanity recognized and respected. Those who have dared till now to find a way or another to justify what is happening in the Gaza Strip will have to endure shame forever. For those calling on our people not to seek vengeance, not to resort to violence, they must support our efforts to deliver justice. That is the path we have chosen, justice, not vengeance. But till now, that path has been obstructed in the face of the Palestinian people, and no one has ever been held accountable for the crimes committed against them. Israeli impunity cannot be allowed to survive this assault. So finally, Palestinian survivors can live with the sense that the massacres will not resume. The horrors this impunity has led to will continue occurring until this is brought to an end. Mr. President, the world is discovering the true Gaza while Israel is destroying it. They discover as Israel destroys our university and schools that we have one of the highest literacy rates in the world. They discover as Israel destroys our historic mosques and churches that we have religious diversity and a Christian community in Gaza that is an integral part of our history, our present and our future. The world discovers the name of brave Palestinian journalists and doctors as they learn they were killed. They discover about a young Palestinian generation that was able to be creative and to perform and to try to lead a life in impossible circumstances, only to face death once again. The world discovers human beings who, despite repeated assaults and a decade and a half of blockade, somehow preserved hope, cultivated it, built their homes to see them destroyed, built them once more, saw them destroyed once more, built them again, built their lives despite loss and suffering. From within the ruins, they were able to rise again, only to face death once again. They found a way back to life, only to see death and destruction haunting them once more. Until when? That is what Israel is attacking. Hope. That is its greatest enemy. The fact the Palestinian people have not relinquished hope. The ability of our people to resurrect. They want to make sure that Palestinians in Gaza have no homes to return to. They want to make sure they have no life to return to. They want to make sure that life in Gaza is no longer possible. With one aim, what they call voluntary migration. Voluntary. 21,000 people killed. Half of them almost children. And by the way, we mentioned the children and the women. Many innocent men have been killed. Voluntary migration, the code name for forced displacement. These are the options for Palestinians. Destruction or displacement. Death or displacement.
וחלילה, פשעי מלחמה זה אני, אתה רגל על הגב. פשעי מלחמה זה אני מודה, אני אגיד את זה פה, לא אכפת לי שירדו עליי, אוספים פה חומרים. אני לא נרדם טוב בלי שאני רואה בתים קורסים בעזה. מה אני אעשה? עוד בתים, עוד מגדלים, שלא יהיה להם לאן לחזור. אגב, בתקופת התנ"ך גם היו זורים את האדמה במלח. הם צריכים לזכור, הם עמלק. הם צריכים לזכור את זה להרבה מאוד זמן. אי אפשר להגיע לאיזה הסדר מיד. סליחה, זה רק אני. זה פשע מלחמה.
We have failed you. This is the awful guilt we carry. We tried, but we did not try hard enough. We will go to Rafah, many of us, reporters. We will stand outside the border with Gaza. Protest. We will write and film. This is what we do. It is not much, but it is something that will tell your story again. Maybe it will be enough to earn the right to ask for your forgiveness. Thank you.
What happened on October 7th was an absolute atrocity, was 1,000 atrocities. I think at the same time we condemn those atrocities, we have to condemn the atrocities that happen every day to Palestinians in the West Bank. You mentioned sexual violence. I was part of the human rights vetting process for arms going to Israel, and a charity called Defense of Children International Palestine drew our attention at the State Department to the sexual assault, actually the rape of a 13-year-old boy that occurred in an Israeli prison in the Mosque in Jerusalem. We examined these allegations. We believed they were credible. We put them to the government of Israel. And you know what happened the next day? The IDF went into the DCIP offices and removed all their computers and declared them a terrorist entity. I think it is vital that atrocities not happen to anyone, not sexual violations, not any kind of gross violation of human rights. We are looking at a situation where there is so much dehumanification, where people are not seen for the value that they have. And I think that's true whether you're talking about those who are attacked on their kibbutz or those who are attacked in their homes in Gaza or in the West Bank. What we really need is to center the human beings who are at the core and who are suffering so much in this conflict.
אני חושב שהמחשבות והרעיונות שאפשר להמשיך ולהחזיק תחת כיבוש. זה תחת כיבוש. אז אפשר לא לאהוב את המילה, אבל מה שקורה זה תחת כיבוש. להחזיק 3.5 מיליון פלסטינים תחת כיבוש, לפי דעתי זה דבר גרוע. זה לא יכול להימשך ללא סוף. אתם רוצים להישאר תמיד בג'נין, בשכם, ברמאללה, בבית לחם, תמיד.
Israel was constructed on the ruins of another society and by the mass dispossession of another people who remain unacknowledged as just sort of obscure natives in the background, back to the desert, let them go to one of the other Arab countries. That's been the position. And we bear the Oslo Accords say specifically that Israel bears no responsibility for the costs of the occupation. This after 20 years, 26 years of military occupation, no responsibility. As an Israeli journalist said, he said, we took over the country in 1948 from the British. The British left us the port of Haifa, a road system, an electrical system, a large number of municipal buildings, and lots of prisons. And we could build Israel. Without that, there would be no state today. If we had taken Palestine in 1948 the way we left Gaza for the Palestinians, there would be no Israel. We destroyed the economy. We deported most of the capable people. We forced the people to live in hovels and refugee camps over a period. I mean, anybody who's been to Gaza, it's one of the most criminal places on earth because of Israeli policy of occupation. And they bear no responsibility for it. I mean, that's simply unacceptable, even for the Jewish people who have suffered so much. It's unacceptable. You cannot continue to victimize somebody else just because you yourself were a victim once. There has to be a limit.
The United States stands completely isolated globally for supporting Israel in this massacre. And the consequences of that are being felt all over the world in shifting alliances, in economic patterns, in changing geopolitical structures, even in the use of the dollar as currency and many other things. There is a massive, a seismic change of geopolitics underway in which the U.S. has chosen nearly total isolation in the world. I see it every day because my job is to be out in the world discussing issues of economic development and finance, the global economy, trade, the currency system. And what's happening is the U.S., so contrary to being what Biden in his fantasy thinks that the world looks to the U.S. for leadership, the world looks at the U.S. aghast. The U.S. stands alone with Israel. Of course, the world's even more aghast at what Israel is doing because we haven't had the real-time video feed of mass slaughter quite this way before. Of course, we've had war in our living rooms, on our social media or television broadcasts, but the real-time slaughter, and as President Erdogan said, of hospitals and schools, I would add mosques, apartment buildings. This is an attempt stated by the Israelis, although we don't want to hear it, so we try not to hear the actual words that are used, but to make Gaza uninhabitable. And that's got a purpose that also needs to be understood. Israel is not fighting Hamas. Israel is fighting for a greater Israel, which is a kind of messianic biblical idea that now is in political ascendancy in Israel, that Israel has the right to control all of the area. It has the right to control the millions and millions of Palestinians because some zealots believe, and they are powerful right now, God said so in the book of Joshua sometime around the 5th century BC. And you can't really make this up because this is 21st century stuff and It's devastating. And this is what we're siding with. I don't think Americans really understand what is motivating the Israelis. I don't think Americans understand the risk of this war widening very significantly, very dangerously, and very fast. This is what we're up against. And unfortunately, we have a president who's not effectively a president. I don't know what he is, but it's the worst foreign policy imaginable.
Actually jeopardized Israel's safety is that for years he deliberately used Hamas as a way to undermine the Palestinian Authority, a rival to Hamas which administers parts of the West Bank and has much more legitimacy on the world stage. Experts say that the idea was basically divide and conquer. If Palestinian leadership remains split and one of the main parties at the table has a terrorism label on it, it's going to be much easier for Netanyahu to refuse to engage with them and say that he has no partner for peace. Here is Smotrich explaining that strategy out loud in 2015.
The Palestinian Authority is a burden, and Hamas is a terrorist organization that no one will recognize, and no one will give it status in the ICC. No one will let them lead a decision in the Security Council. The main pitch we are playing now is international delegitimization. Hamas, at this point, in my opinion, will be an asset.
Hamas is an asset. If you are calling the group that has repeatedly killed your people an asset, it shows pretty clearly that what you care about isn't safety, but total control. And for years, Netanyahu's government was actually allowing suitcases of cash to be delivered to Hamas. So when that scandal broke, Netanyahu insisted that that money was for humanitarian aid, which still doesn't explain why it had to be delivered in luggage in the back of a fucking car. The point is, Netanyahu took the risk of betting that he could control Hamas and use them to his own ends, and he was horribly wrong about that, to the point that his ministers are now getting screamed out of hospitals.
You really know what happened on October 7th. You think you do, but believe me, you don't. You've been lied to. We all have. The Zionist media has presented this event to the world as a Holocaust against innocent civilians. But the story couldn't be more different. The Zionists have been lying because they are terrified of what actually happened. You see, October 7th is one of the biggest ongoing cover-ups in recent memory. A grand lie to distract you from the truth. And it's been working. People have either bought into the atrocity propaganda lies, or they're too busy trying to disprove it. Palestinians didn't behead babies, didn't put babies in ovens, didn't rape women, they didn't torture civilians. So many of us have been so focused on what didn't happen on October 7th. What we need to do now is focus on what did happen. Now, let's get to it. What really happened on October 7th? And why has Israel tried to cover it up? The truth is that on October 7th, resistance fighters from Gaza carried out a daring military operation against a juggernaut, and they succeeded. Israel, in its hubris, had begun to believe that the Palestinian movement was uninterested in armed resistance. From within the confines of their concentration camps, underdogs from Gaza had to avoid detection from constant surveillance by satellites, informants, collaborators, motion detection and seismic sensors, and 24/7 monitoring by 2G phone networks, border cameras, and overhead drones. They undermined Israel's security apparatus by planning details on pen and paper, feeding false information to informants, and leveraged Israeli arrogance and complacency to plan and operate relatively undetected. In the early hours of October 7th, a blitz of over 2,200 rockets were fired at the Iron Dome missile defense system. But this was only truly meant to provide the cover needed to fly drones over the $1 billion Iron Wall and destroy the remote-controlled machine gun turrets and communication towers. They rammed through the first layer of defense and then created over 20 separate breach points through the main Iron Wall. Their immediate objectives: take out important nearby command and control military sites, and do so as quickly as possible before the Israelis could respond. So they split into small divisions and raced to their targets. Speedboats raced across the ocean and onto the beaches of Sikkim, while paragliders flew over the wall and landed in various areas. Guys on beat-up motorcycles and pickup trucks used homemade anti-tank missiles to take out $3 million Merkava tanks and $20 million Apache helicopters. They conquered Re'im military base, an important communications and drone surveillance headquarters, killing or capturing all the soldiers inside before destroying the server rooms. According to Scott Ritter, Hamas struck the headquarters of the Gaza division, the local intelligence hub, and other major command and control facilities with brutal precision, turning what should have been a 5-minute response time into many hours. More than enough time for Hamas to carry out one of its primary objectives, the taking of hostages, to use as exchange for the near 5,000 men, women, and children rotting in Israeli administrative detention centers, returning to Gaza with more than 230 Israeli soldiers and civilians. The result was a complete rout of local Israeli military forces. For hours, the Israelis were completely in the dark, confused as to where the attack was even coming from. Thousands of rockets were in the air, dozens of bases and military settlements, aka kibbutz, were captured, and multiple helicopters and tanks were destroyed. The attack came so hard and so fast that many IDF soldiers were still in their pajamas as the resistance fighters entered the barracks. How could these half-starved and besieged fighters have the gall to escape their prison and carry out an attack like this? No one in Israel could have imagined it, let alone expected. Desperate to respond, the Israelis began to implement scorched earth tactics. Their helicopters began firing Hellfire missiles and machine gun rounds indiscriminately at vehicles and people running in the fields. Tanks rolled through the kibbutz and main roads and shelled houses as ground troops exchanged fire with militants. This led to the deaths of many civilians. It was the most humiliating defeat in Israel's history and has created an internal political crisis that could break the Israeli government for good. Netanyahu, desperate to hold on to power, is exchanging accusations with the military and intelligence apparatus, as neither want to take responsibility for the humiliating defeat. Tens of thousands of Israeli protesters are in the streets demanding that Israel agree to a hostage swap with the Palestinians in order to save their family members.
Clear that on October 7th, a good number, we don't know what the number is, but a good number of the Israelis who were killed were not killed by Hamas, they were killed by the IDF. And I find that hardly surprising given the nature of the fight that was taking place. It is hard to discriminate in those situations, that if hostages are captured, it will be almost impossible for Israel not to pay an enormous price to get those hostages back. So it's better to surreptitiously kill them, better for the IDF to surreptitiously kill them, rather than have them become hostages. And there is a great deal of evidence that there is this Hannibal doctrine in practice inside of Israel.
That's murder.
I guess you could call it that.
Our tanks attack.
Fired on them.
Yeah. Inside this house were another 15 burned people, among them 8 babies in this home, because they were blocked in these houses, and we need to conquer back the whole settlement, and it couldn't be happened without tanks. Our tanks attack.
Fired on them.
Yeah.
בא לראות טנק בתוך בארי, נוסע על הכביש. הופה, היה שם איזה ירי.
Wow. He was out there as a young photojournalist and was covering the ISM, which is a protest movement. And he was rescuing some children, or trying to help rescue children from sniper fire from an Israeli watchtower. And he was shot by one of their soldiers. And that led to quite a long investigation to find out what was happening. And I think one of the lessons that we learned from that was that you can't place any reliance on Israeli accounts of events. And I think that's why I feel it's particularly relevant today when we're hearing the Israelis explain their actions in Gaza. The investigation we undertook showed that they routinely falsely misrepresent civilians as military targets, as bearing arms or as militants, and use that as a pretext for shooting them. And the investigation we carried out showed that that was exactly what was happening on that occasion. It's what we were led to believe by those in the diplomatic sector who advised us at the time. And so our worry was that this was happening again now, and the Israelis are very similar to what's happening with the claims that Hamas are using hospitals and civilian facilities and so on as bases, and that's why they target hospitals and the infrastructure and water treatment plants and so on. So I think that was our concern, that this was happening again, because it does seem that that's the IDF approach, to routinely misrepresent what are ordinary civilian targets as in some way tainted with a military aspect, and therefore justify their attacking them.
צריך להרגיש בעל הבית, אז עושים את זה כמו שצריך. אי אפשר לבזבז כזה מזג אוויר. הכל שלנו, שימו לב, תראו איזה טיילת, ועכשיו, תכירו, החוף של נובה. איווה! החוף שלנו! ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. From Israel, we want to do peace. Where are you from? Afghanistan. Afghanistan, wow, you are very stupid. But you lost to Saudi yesterday. So you're from Israel. I can teach you how to beat Arabs. Beautiful. What? Not so much. Why? Why are you from? I'm Israel. Where is Israel? I have Israel. Only Palestine. No, this is Israel. We will fight to death to bring our hostages. But you know what will be the picture of the victory? The victory will be when Gaza will go in fire, that God will look up and say, what is this?
Looking for babies, but there is no babies left.
What babies? Say that again. Say it again.
No, maybe I killed a girl, she was 12, but I'm looking for a baby.
I'm here just outside the old city of Hebron in the occupied West Bank. Before the 7th of October, local Palestinians say their movement, their rights were greatly restricted in the city. And after the war started in October, it only became much worse. So for example, this street that they used to be able to use is now forbidden. They cannot use it except for an hour in the morning and an hour at night. And all of the shops have been closed here. And only Israeli settlers and Israeli soldiers and military are allowed to use this street right now. تشرح لي انه كيف وين عايشين المستوطنين وين عايشين الفلسطينيين يعني هون.
هذا انا هاي بيتي. هاي في البيت الجنبي هذا اللي استولوا عليه. ايوه هون جنب الجيش هذا المستوطن في قلبه. وهذه كلها قريات 4 اللي حوالينا. احنا وياه يعني انا شو بيقسمني بينه وبينه هي الشارع فيش بينه وبينهم 100 متر. هو بياخذ حريته بيروح وبيجي زي ما بده. اولادهم بيلعبوا زي ما بدهم على الشارع، انا اولادي محشرين في البيت. يعني هاي بنت انتهي شو بدها تطلع هي بدها تطلع من البيت. بدهاش تطلع بالساعه 4، يعني انا اليوم طالع من بيتي هي طلعت الساعه 7 بقدرش اخش بيتي، هي بيني وبين الشارع البيت بالشارع. ما انا اخش على بيتي الا بعد الساعه 4. معي ساعه من 4 ل5 اخش على بيتي.
As a foreigner, I was able to walk around while people actually from here weren't. When it reached 4 o'clock, there was finally a sign of life from Palestinians. But some were still struggling to do the simplest of tasks.
عند ابني بدي اروح على البيت، هاي السيارة سيارة ابن ابني بدي يحملني مش قادرة امشي تعبانة حتى احمل الاغراض هدول. هي حبيبي قول لي لا طب انت هي الساعة 4 مفتوح التجول. قال لا روحي هيك تحت، وين بدي اروح تحت؟ رجلي بيوجعوني. واحد طلع حامله هي هذا وهذا وهذا.
شو رح تعملي؟ ايش رح تعملي هلا؟
هاي شو بدي اعمل؟ قصر كم حاجه. قلت له يرضى عليك يرضى عليك. الله يرضى عليك. هذا بص خدك الثاني. الله يساعدنا يحل مشكلتنا يا الله.
This woman is just trying to get these clothes to her son, but the soldiers are telling her she can't go this way. She can only go from down, so making her life very difficult.
من فوق كمان. إلا خلاص تفتح.
حسبي الله ونعم الوكيل. أنا بعرف المعبر ولا بعرف شيء.
أنا عندي دكان بقدرش أفتحه. هذا عنده محل بيقدرش يروح يجي ولا أي شغلة كانت. ولا أي شغلة. وأولاد مدارس ما فيش بروح على المدرسة. واحد بده ياخذ بنته الصبحيات على الروضة بيعرفش يوديها. أولاد التوجيه بروحوش. أولاد أي مدرسة ما بروحوا. هاي شهرين عنا ولا طالب من المنطقة المحاصرة راح على دوامه.
It's just about 5 o'clock, and all the Palestinians we just saw who had this 1 hour to move around, to go to their homes, to handle whatever they needed to take care of, have now pretty much all gone home, because when the clock strikes 5, the curfew starts, and in this neighborhood, this part of Hebron, they are not able to be outside at all.
So far, the H group in Palestine has already killed nearly 3,000 IDF soldiers and injured over 11,000 IDF soldiers. And they've destroyed hundreds of vehicles, tanks, bulldozers, etc. This is a group that is running around in Adidas pants and flip-flops. A group that's cut off from the world. Can you imagine how furious the people in Israel are right now? Of course, mainstream media isn't reporting any of this, but the people inside Israel have clear evidence. Their sons and daughters are coming back in boxes. You can't hide that. You can't hide that. People are grieving. People are upset with the Israeli government. They've had enough. People are leaving Israel and not looking back. To all the Israelis, peace is the only way, because you can't get rid of a force that is underground, and you don't know where these tunnels are leading. You don't even know if they're getting resupplied underground. You don't even know. And then you
Bye.